Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Coleman, and I'm grateful that you're all here tonight for our conversation about She Dies Tomorrow with Amy Seimetz, the writer and director, and one of the film's leads, Caitlin Sheil. I am the founder of The Future of Film is Female, which is an organization that amplifies the voice of all women filmmakers through our funding, exhibition, and community building programs. And one of the things that we have been able to do during the pandemic is start a streaming section that allows us to continue to give voices to women filmmakers while the cinemas have been closed. And I'm really thankful for this opportunity to have Amy and Caitlin here to talk about this incredible film that I'm so glad was released despite cinemas being closed, but also because it's so relevant now. If we can bring them up. Hi, Amy. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
Hi.
Let me unmute myself. Got it.
Okay, good. So I want to start with a story because I'm also the director of programming at Nighthawk Cinema, and She Dies Tomorrow was literally the last film I screened in a theater before we shut down. We shut down on March 13th, and we did a private screening of your film on March 11th because it was supposed to premiere at South by Southwest, and one of the things I was trying to do at the cinema was get those films played so people could see them and write about them. And because I was like, there's no way movie theaters are going to close down. So it's actually very special for me to have you both here to talk about this film that when I introduced it, the private screening, I was like, thank you all for braving the apocalypse to come here. And then, you know, little did I know, it feels like that was about 50 years ago. So thank you both for being here. I obviously saw this film in March and it sort of stuck with me since then. And obviously I rewatched it recently, and it's sort of like the subject matter of the film. It just really stays with you. So it's been months since I've been thinking about this film. So I sort of want to ask you everything, but I want to start off by asking what's probably a very obvious question. But where did this idea come from about doing a film about contagious anxiety?
I was dealing with my own anxiety for many reasons, and I realized that in order to alleviate it, I was trying to talk to friends about it, but maybe a little too much, and felt like I was passing off the anxiety to them, whether that's like the anxiety itself or the burden of the anxiety, right? Like I felt like such a burden. And namely those two people, or a few of them, there were a lot of them, was Kate Sheil and Jane Addams, actually in real life, because they're both happen to be my friends. And so I was dealing with that. And then in addition to that, and I really wanted to tackle that and sort of explore, like, wouldn't it be great if just for a second I could just pass it off to you guys so you could understand what I'm feeling, so that we don't have to have these endless conversations, because they're not necessarily helping me. Not that they're not being great friends, but you know, it's just, you can, there's only so many words, and words have boundaries to describe a feeling. So I really wanted to make something that felt like what it feels like to have these anxiety or panic attacks. And then in addition to that, on a macro level, I had been so obsessed with the news leading up to the 2016 elections, and then continuing now. I'm not saying that I'm not over it. I watch the news incessantly, but watching as, like, every few days there was a new topic, and whether you're on the right, left, or center, it was like people would talk about it so, you know, incessantly for like 3 days. Then it was another topic, and then there was another topic, and there's another topic, and it's almost like this spreading like wildfire, like in these short amounts of time. And then suddenly it was another thing. So it was on the macro level, it was that, but then taking it very personal, and approaching it in a very personal way was sort of what I was sort of exploring in a way.
Yeah, I still do that with the news. I have a tendency to listen to the news while I work, and then I wonder why I feel so like nuts at the end of the day. But it's like I've been feeling like there's this obligation to always know what's going on.
It's me at my door, but it's totally fine. I think it's funny because it's for whom the bell tolls right now. But for my, I knew that was about to happen. I wish I had planned it, but anyway, it's just food delivery. Sorry, go ahead with your question.
No, it was just more of a statement of like I'm like nodding because I totally understand this, like even pre-pandemic kind of obsession with, you know, figuring out what's going on all the time. And, you know, I think that obviously releasing a film right now is strange for any kind of movie that's coming out. But for your film in particular, it takes on like a different resonance and sort of a different meaning. And sometimes I think, you know, films are coming out right now that you can kind of read through the lens of this sort of collective experience that we're all dealing with. But like, it's a sign that a filmmaker is like in tune with the world that's kind of going on, or what's going on around them. So, and I guess this is a question to both of you, but what do you think, you know, viewing it in the moment that we're in now, maybe not the moment that was in like earlier this year, what do you think really hits like the spot for people, like that, what maybe like makes it people relate to it most now than maybe before?
Yeah, I'm well, I guess the obvious in a way that I couldn't have predicted, in the contagious element, but also I think in the level of like isolation, you know, of all this time that you have with yourself, but also facing sort of very firsthand the consequences and the mortality rates like that we keep looking at. That's like basically when you look at the news, it's like they have that ticker, no matter what the news is, like the ticker on the side of the screen where you're just like looking at the death toll in this really weird, like not weird, but real way. And I think there it's unavoidable to think about death right now, but even if it starts to become abstracted, I think lots of people are feeling very isolated and just really desire connection, which was another thing in the movie is the desire for connection. I don't know if Kate wants to take that any further.
I feel like you covered it pretty well, but I would say, yeah, the movie kind of stares down the barrel of this thing that typically when circumstances are not as they are right now, we have so many things to distract us from, but right now we're just mostly, you know, we have so many fewer distractions that it's hard not to kind of grapple with your anxiety in a sort of one-on-one, head-on fashion. And I don't think either Amy or myself could have anticipated that these would be the circumstances under which
Sure.
At least, yeah.
If you had known, I wish you would have told us.
Yeah.
No, I really wish. I love control. Like if it's my fault, then I love when things are my fault because then I can fix them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then why, I mean, there was this interesting article with you and Steven Soderbergh about contagion in your film. And there was an interesting question about like why, and I always ask this about like horror movies in general, like why do people gravitate towards them? But what do you think that it is that makes people kind of gravitate towards something right now that would be so personal? I mean, I find a little bit of comfort now. In the beginning, it was a little bit different, but now I find a little like more comfort in watching films that kind of speak to me at this moment. I'm a little less sensitive. But what do you think that it is?
I mean, I think I think it's connection in this way. Like when you, even outside of COVID, is watching a film that's like, oh, like somebody explored that, and like some things that are like sometimes the things that I connect to the most are like, oh my God, that was so obvious. How did I not see that? You know, or I get like jealous because I'm like, oh, that was so obvious. It was there all along, you know? And like what a universal feeling. But at the same time, you know, I think I early on with COVID was watching just to distract myself, like crap television. And I think in that article I mentioned it. I definitely watched all of Too Hot to Handle, even though it's not I really don't watch reality TV all that often, save like you know, British Bake Off, but which I watched all of during quarantine. And then I kind of ran out of the surface content because I binge watched like Love Is Blind as well. Thinking that I was gonna laugh, I watched Ricky Gervais' Afterlife, the 2 seasons of that, and thinking that I was like gonna like sign up for like a new office, you know.
Yeah.
Even can get very dark too, the British one. And I just sobbed the entire time. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is so intensely beautiful and human and about loss. He loses his wife that he loved very much, and I just sobbed the entire time. And afterwards, and I couldn't get enough of it. And afterwards, I felt better because I realized what I was avoiding was the thing that was continuing to make me anxious. Like I can only watch so many beautiful people in bikinis trying not to have sex with each other, you know, and before I start to realize like the existential dread is not going away, you know?
Yeah.
So a catharsis in it, you know, of like, oh, good, I've exercised that, as opposed to it just continuing to be in my head.
Yeah. Caitlin, is there anything you've been watching that's made you cry or avoid?
Oh,
I mean, I watched Love is Blind too, and that feel all sorts of things.
I've always, and I'm a reality TV person. I love Real Housewives, but now I've like been watching it, and now I'm like, this is such petty shit. I can't deal with this anymore. But I did finally watch the Anderson Cooper documentary with his mom that Liz Garbus did, and it hit me so hard that I mean, it's like the one moment during the pandemic that, because it's also about loss and it's about love and it's about trying to live your life, and I just lost it. And I felt like the next day, like I had been in a fight all night. And then, but then I kind of did feel better afterwards, you know, and it's just like, it's strange, those things that are going to hit you at a different point. And it's allowed me to kind of like start watching other things, but I didn't expect that from like a Gloria Vanderbilt documentary.
Right. I mean, society at large, I mean, this is sort of what I was writing about before, is like, you know, we there, in order for society to function, we do have to have a healthy level of denial of death, or else why would you get out of bed in the morning? But I feel like in the pandemic, it's like sort of reached this pitch of ignoring these things, but also not specifically in the pandemic and being isolated, is like you forget the range of emotions that you go through every day when you come in contact, even if it's just like, whoa, that guy's an asshole, or whoa, like, you know, even if it's fleeting and you're not even have to go in contact with them, or you like see other life that makes you sad, or, you know, this range of emotions that when you have contact with people and you have these interactions that you feel on a sort of multitude of levels. And sort of in quarantine, it's like, I feel like I'm really missing that exercise of all of these facets, not to make myself sound manic, but you know what I mean? Like when you hear a story or you're talking to somebody in person, it's just much more on the telephone now with, you know, with quarantines. Like we only want to talk about like good things for the most part, you know, unless you're losing family members or, you know, going through the thick of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there is this sort of element of like when you're reaching out to everyone, you're like, I'm fine, but I'm not fine, because you all know that this is what's going on. Caitlin, I wanted to ask, how did you, this is sort of a little bit of a shift, but I guess dealing with end of days, how did you feel about the way that your character, Amy, approached the end of her life and how she kind of was dealing with it on her last day? Because I love how all the characters kind of deal with it differently. I think I would have dealt with it like Jason. Like, I'm freaking out, but
Yeah, I mean, yes, Amy completely crafted that arc for me, and I found it to be, I was so happy with it and happy that she asked me to do it, because I do relate to this idea of like kind of just choking in your last night, you know, not quite being able to figure out what you should do, and really struggling to sort of process the enormity of it, and trying and failing to feel something really momentous, and then finally getting there to some degree, but still, even by the end, just being like, I really want to feel it, but I can't quite get there. It's too big, and I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah, totally.
I liked that it wasn't heroic in any way. It was just sort of like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck.
I saw someone on Twitter that was like, all I want is a woman who walks around her house and feels the walls. And I just sort of like, that was like
here.
And I was like, I think that's in reference to She Dies Tomorrow. I wasn't quite sure. But yeah, no, that notion of like these things that you always take for granted, like feeling things in the wood and trying to figure out like what actually is important right now. I would have felt wine was important too. But did you feel like, because there is sort of this like ambiguity as to what's happening, do you feel like that like helped you with your character and like the freedom that you had to kind of experiment with like representing how she would feel about it?
I think that it's all pretty finely calibrated by Amy. And so I always felt a great deal of specificity in terms of what I was being asked to do. So Amy definitely gives you room to figure things out on your own. But to me, it was relatively choreographed, which I found to be incredibly comforting, because then I'm just sort of slipping into Amy's vision. Not to say Amy's incredibly collaborative, but to me, it felt like I always had clarity in terms of where the character was at, and that's all a credit to Amy.
Well, I should say also, Kate and I have a shorthand, so it's not. She's making me sound like the best communicator in the world, but there's also an understanding that we have from working together for years and years and years about what, not just because we like the same movies and we really enjoy, tone and sort of watching performances that are extremely irrational and don't necessarily make sense on a like if I linear fashion told you exactly what was happening, that like you sort of like have this emotional response to whatever it is, even though you're like, I'm not sure why I identify with this, but I know the feeling, so like Kate and I both really love that, or love movies that can access that point in you. So it's not, we did have a specificity of sort of language of what we were trying to access, but it was in terms of what we were talking about was beyond a literal explanation in a way.
Yeah, I feel like when Amy told me that the next time you were going to see my character, she was going to be riding a dune buggy, it was like, yep, for sure.
I love that scene. That's a good like last night kind of activity.
It really sort of figures it out.
Well, it seems like Amy is a special person to work with. It just seems like from the people that you've worked with, they really enjoy it, and what you were just saying. So I'd love to talk about your casting and sort of bringing back Kentucker Audley and Caitlin from Sun Don't Shine, who I think the two of you are kind of magical together, but also with the rest of the cast as well, which is everyone that pops up. I'm like, they're just so amazing, and I think Tunde is just perfect in that role. So so I guess it's another kind of boring question, but what was the decision of bringing back Kentucker and Caitlin, and then also the other people who were involved?
Well, I love talking about people I love, so it's not boring to me. but I mean, with all the cast, most everyone I've worked with before, or have known for years and years and years, and save Michelle Rodriguez and Josh Lucas, even Olivia Taylor-Dudley. I've known her for years. We've been friends, and we were waiting for something to work on together, and I was just so excited that she could be in it. And so with that, it's like I wrote once they were available. I mean, that's one aspect of it. Once they were available, then whatever idea I had, I made sure to write it or cater it so that they had the opportunity to just play, and that it was just as beneficial to them as like an experience as it was, going out into the world. Like Jane, for instance, who I've just been like dying to sort of capture lightning in a bottle, because she's like wild, and I love watching her perform, but she's also my dear friend, and I also like a lot of the stuff that we wrote, she'd say this is like, that beginning phone conversation where she's telling Kate that she can't hear her on the phone.
Yeah,
This is how it feels to talk. Like, I mean, that is a verbatim conversation. How, like, if I try to complain about something, she's a great friend, by the way. But if I start to complain about something, she's like, "Oh, Amy, no," and she's like, "Just go for a walk. Life is beautiful." And then she'll call me back in a panic and be like, "It just sunk in what was happening to you," and I just realized how crazy. Like, this is crazy. Like, so, like, all of, like, it was so great to be able to, you know, play to everyone's strengths, and then allow them to surprise me as well. But with Kate and Kentucker, yeah, it's just again, like, Kate and Kentucker also, outside of just Sun Don't Shine and everything else, we all know each other so well. So there's just a familiarity there in performance. Yeah. And I find him so, I mean, I find these are not hyperbolic statements. I actually feel this way, is that I feel like he has this Paul Newman-ish charm that I like, was the whole reason I cast him, and I still feel that way. And I feel like Kate has this like Meryl Streep like charm, you know, and like all my favorite cinema, and being able to sort of give them the space to show their how magnificent they are in my films is so rewarding for me, and hopefully for them as well.
Yeah,
I'm gonna see if he's on here. I see, he's probably not. No, he's not. No, he's he's a jerk. Forget all the nice things I said. Well, shifting a little bit, you know, it would be kind of bad form to not talk about the kind of mood that this film is in terms of visuals and sound. This kind of like fever dream marriage of lights and this great soundtrack, but also just this vibrating hum to it. And so how did you and your team kind of approach making that visual a reality? I mean, was it something that you kind of like knew off the bat, or was it a bit more kind of collaborative?
It's a we'll put it this way. I always hire people that are better at things than me. So like Kate and Kentucker and Jane and all these people, like, so bringing on the people that you're like, you're going to do a better job than I can do at this. And knowing, and then the same with like Jay Keitel, is like, you know, I like to get my hands dirty, and there were scenes that I like actually like camera opt and did some things when we had a 2-camera day, and I love doing that, and I've done that with Jay many times, like in shooting with him. And then Mary Ellen Porto, who did the sound design, who did my second season of The Girlfriend Experience, and then the Mondo Boys, who did the score for the second season of The Girlfriend Experience. You know, I basically just told them all an idea, and then they'd send me things, and my directive to them, initially, when it was sort of like we're trying to figure out the shape of this whole thing and sort of how far we can go, was to push it as far as like to the brink of maybe tasteless, you know, and then we can pull back, because we can always pull back, but it's very hard to go further once, you know, you've established minimalism in a way.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me, is to sort of juxtapose, you know, the minimalist and the minimalist quality of the film with a lot of silence and a lot of, you know, very minimal dialogue, with these explosive moments, and allowing the Mondo Boys to get very melodramatic in certain points, and allowing Mary Ellen to get really sort of wild with the vibrations and the hums and the sound design, and allowing Jay to go really far with you know, the visuals. But all of it, yeah, was all for all of us. I mean, I think it was an experimentation, even performance wise. It's like embracing, like, especially with Kate dancing that first time, there's like an element, what I love about it is like there's an element, and she does it so well, it's like the element of trying to dance, but that even alone you're a little self-conscious of it, you know, like trying to get into it, but then like, what am I doing, like, why am, you know, so with all of it, like with just anything aesthetically, it was like, yes, it's a collaboration, but it was constantly communicating what the feeling was, which is like a roller coaster of anxiety, right? Like visually and sonically, and the interplay of that. And even when we got to the post-production, you know, Nat Jenks, who's the colorist, and Mary Ellen, we were sending cuts back and forth as we were doing it, so that they had the opportunity to see the color timing, so they could see what we were doing with that, so they could really even play along with like the sort of, we desaturate certain scenes so that the sound can play along with that, and that he could hear that so he could play along with it, so that everyone felt supported in a way. In the way that like Kate knows I direct, where I'm like, in this moment, I know it feels weird and silly, you know, but there's going to be chaotic sound design, so you can't go far enough, you know. It's not going to look stupid. You're going to be supported by all of this, all the visuals and all of the sound and stuff.
Yeah, this is something that Jane and I have talked about a lot over the course of the past couple of weeks, but as just from the acting perspective, you always feel safe as an actor with Amy. Like you can try things that maybe on a different project you would sort of cover your bases or protect yourself a little, but you feel safe doing it with Amy because you know she's never going to let you look bad or put something in that isn't your best work. And that really, you know, she creates a safe environment for you to take swings, which is very nice.
And I feel like it's sort of in the way in which like you view it as a viewer, it's sort of a safe viewing experience, because what you're seeing is kind of, it's not necessarily straightforward, but you feel really comforted in that. And it's very intimate. Like even with Sun Don't Shine, which is kind of this bleached out Florida color, like everything is so close up and so intimate, and you just feel like it's not okay, but you're okay watching it and experiencing this. And one of the things I was talking to about a friend of mine who saw this recently at a drive-in theater in LA, and we were talking about the humor that's in the film. And so I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think Jane really brings a lot of the humor to it, especially at the end when she's in the pool. I just think that's really great. Like, I'm dying today. But how important was that to kind of make sure there were these moments of, like, I know when Caitlin's like trying to cry in the mirror, and then she's just like, oh, I can't do this, you know, like, or in the window, like, I can't do it. Is that just kind of like part of death?
I mean, for me, it is. For me, experiencing it very close hands with people that I've lost, and namely my dad, like that, I've never laughed harder than in some of these, you know, in the darkest hour, because there's an absurdity to the juxtaposition of how dire it is, and then these you know, catching yourself in these sort of absurdist, almost trivial moments, you know,
yeah,
of like trying to make yourself cry and not being successful at it because you feel like you're supposed to be doing that, or you know, or having, you know, or her deciding like, I'm fuck it, to feel better right now, I'm just gonna leaf blow, it's working right now in the middle of the night. Like, you know, like you have these sort of when you're going through something traumatic or loss, like you have these moments that's like, whatever it is that makes me feel better, I'm gonna do it. You know, I'm giving myself liberty to do it. You know, obviously if you don't, so you don't hurt somebody. But even in this film, it's like to acknowledge that is that they feel like they have the right, because they're feeling pain, to hurt somebody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but also I wanted, you know, in casting everyone has a very dark sense of humor, but they're all at different sort of like tenors. You know, it's like Kate is at this very, the way that we explore it is in this very deadpan sort of way, you know, in the expression of that. It's like a very deadpan expression of humor. Jane is a lot more erratic and emotive of like this is great, this is just, but that's like her personality. And then everyone, you know, and Chris Messina, who's so lovely, is like how beautiful his humor comes through, is like he really in real life, but also in the character, is like he really wants to make sure everyone's okay, and there's like tension in that. And then like Katie, I would say that Katie is that person, but she's not. She's the loveliest. Katie Austin. She's the loveliest, but like you can see, I've said this to her before at her face. I was like, I love you, but I would be so scared of you in high school. Like it seemed like if you didn't like me, you would scare the living shit out of me. Because she's so funny, you know, and there's nothing worse than a funny, smart bully in a way.
Yeah.
You know, and she's not a bully. I don't want to say that. It's just there's something about her. I'm like, if I was in high school with you, I'd be terrified. And she just gives that off, whether that's true or not. And then Tunde, you know, I've worked with him before, and he's so good because he's hilarious, one, and obviously a rock star. But he's so good at listening. He's like one of the best listeners. And Jen is so sweet, but she has this darkness that you over time sort of like discover, you know, but it's also like dark and hilarious. So like allowing them to sort of embody all these different senses of humor together, because I wanted everyone to have a different response, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so I want to mention to everyone who's watching too, we do have a Q&A little box thing if you're on the Zoom part of it, where you can ask a question. So if you have a question to ask, please do so there, and then we'll maybe answer it. But one of those questions is kind of in line with that, because Matilda asks, how did you approach shooting that sense of fear or looming doom within so many different characters? And I guess you kind of fit some of that into their individual personalities.
Yeah, and allowing them to find, again, because I'm an actor, I guess what it is giving them the sort of the function in the movie, right? Like, you are playing this character, but here's this space where you can make it your own. Especially in that response, especially the response to the flashing lights and the moment that it dawns on them that it's going to happen, is like not pressuring them of like the specificity of what I was looking for. And again, that night, like I say 90, every interview I do, I change the number. Somewhere between 65% and 90% of my job is casting, you know, in direction. And trust, and trusting that like I have the luxury of working with such great actors, but giving, like, respecting them. I liken it to any sort of job where it's you know, outside of film, I had these office jobs when I was trying to make a living outside of film and just have a job where I was making money. And anytime I had a boss that was like micromanaging, I just couldn't perform. I felt like I was infantilized, you know?
Yeah.
There was no respect of, and even as basic as some of the tasks were, it was like they were micromanaging to the point where I'm like, is there something more complicated that I'm not getting? You know? So
no.
In casting them, it's like, here it is. I respect you and what you do, and that's why you're here, and allowing them to sort of get to those performance spaces.
And then we have another question for both of you. Can you talk about the staging and production design? It's almost iconic within a filter of dread. Where is the leaf blower, and where did the silver dress come from? I love the dress. I think that was such a great choice in the film, and your face when you pick it out, like, whatever. I mean, of course you're going to wear a sequin dress. Yeah. And I also felt like the leaf blower was such an LA thing, like such an LA, like, F you, that I loved it. With this leaf blower, thanks.
Everyone hates leaf blowers.
Maybe a week and a half ago sent me a picture of the leaf blower in the can, like she had just finally, it had worn out, and she was, I guess maybe you're getting a new leaf blower, but it was in a garbage can, and it made me so sad.
It's your leaf blower?
Here's the thing. So like, when you're talking about the leaf blower and the dress, like and then I'm like, it's not she's not necessarily Amy. Me. Like, then you talk about the leaf blower and the dress, and I'm like, well, okay, like, so I threw a face. I was like a new homeowner, and I was like, you know, you get these things called leaf blowers, even though I knew about them. It was just, Home Depot became this like wild land of like possibilities, you know? And I was like, I can just own a leaf blower, even though everyone in LA hates leaf blowers because they come off of it. But I like bought one because I was just like, you just can do this. It's like so nice and meditative, and like, wasn't doing it early in the morning, but I wasn't even doing anything. And I think they're also pretty absurd because all they're doing is just like blowing things somewhere else.
Just somewhere else. Yes, there's a very like collection of it. It's just
There's an absurdity to leaf blowing.
Someone else's problem now.
But I will say, as somebody that like got into it for a little bit, it's really gratifying. And just to see things move, you know, and you're just like pointing them is really beautiful. And then the dress, Kate can take that. I mean, that's my dress. Yeah.
The dress belongs to Amy. Amy wore it to the Emmys earlier that year, the year that we began shooting the movie, and she wanted to get her money's worth. And
it also was a sort of a trying time for me of having this great, like being at the Emmys. Like Zazie Beetz was nominated for my episodes for Atlanta. And like I went and I was like, I should be like super connected, like in the way that I was like exploring with Kate, super connected to this moment and feel really proud. But instead it felt like, I don't want to take away, I mean, because I love all of the people I made stuff with, but like the Emmys and awards, they always feel so disconnected from the actual thing that I love so much, which is working with people. So it felt like a nightmare to me. And then in addition to that, I was just dealing with some like life stuff that like really made it not fun. And so, but I loved that dress and I was like, oh man, I didn't get the worth out of it, but how great would it be if Kate wears this, especially since I'm exploring my own sort of shit that I was going through during that time. That like she puts that dress on and it's like, okay, I didn't get the night out of this. I'm gonna get it like tonight.
You reclaimed it.
Absolutely torn to shreds.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Iconic image, cigarette, leaf blower, sequins dress. It's good. And then there's another question, I don't know who it's from, but it says, knowing the lighting was staged and was a practical effect, Caitlin, were you prepared for all of that light work? And then I'll ask, there's a second part, but I'll have you answer that one first.
Sure.
You answer it. I'm going to just walk away for 1 second.
Sure.
Yes, Amy ran what that scene was going to look like by me before we shot it and sort of talked me through what it was that I was supposed to be conveying. And I definitely, I think what I said to her was, okay, great. And what I felt internally was, oh no, I'm going to absolutely ruin her movie. That's very, very, very hard to, I don't know, try and convey joy and grief and ecstasy and agony and all of these things, which is what Amy was sort of looking for at the same time. But, you know, also how great that somebody is asking you to do that. Like gift is such a tough word, but how nice of them to think that you might be able to pull it off, I guess.
Well, that's a beautiful thing about her as a performer. I know there's a second part of that question is like sort of part of the direction for everyone too, is like, don't force something, you know, like if you feel like you go there and then it's like, whatever the next sort of instinctual, I mean, Kate and I love Isabelle Adjani's performance in Possession, right? And it's sort of like, allow it to be unhinged. It don't follow through an emotion if you don't feel it, right? Just like go to the next one that you would sort of like, and just sort of drift, like, because that's, you know, don't force anything, because it should just be a flood of like, almost like a dance in a way, emotionally.
Well, the second part of the question was there a preparation? I guess there's a specific preparation that you kind of went through for like, is this death scenes? Like, is this it?
Right. Yeah, I feel like with anything, you just sort of try and find ways to relate it to your own life and figure out, you know, approximate what the closest thing you might have felt to that, you know, would be, and then try and use that, I guess. But I would also say I do want to give like all credit to Amy pretty much, because it was very much, the beats were very precisely scripted for me, and that was made it so much easier for me to slip into it.
Okay, so we have one last question, also for Caitlin. Outside of collaborating with Amy, what films, characters inspired this role for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Amy and I have talked a lot about Isabella Gianni's performance in Possession. And I feel like probably at least my version of the colorful lights, realization is, it definitely owes a lot to her. And then I feel like Isabelle Huppert is always sort of looming large for me. This one in particular, I would say, yeah. And in which particular movie, I'm not sure. Her entire
she has that, she possesses that control, but like that dark sense of humor in everything that she does.
Yeah, that's what makes her so fantastic. Well, my last question for you is, I want to ask each of you, how would you spend your last day on Earth? You could just say like one thing you do. You don't have to give me like the whole itinerary.
I think I just stare at a wall. I'm not kidding. I've gone through this. Obviously, I've like thought about it.
Yes. You've thought about it?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I do think I would end up staring at a wall, because I would think about all the different things that I would do, and I'd play them out circumstantially and realize that I would be more at peace, just sort of letting. One of my favorite things, honestly, and one of the reasons I went into writing in the first place is I love daydreaming. And I feel like if everyone says I'd be with the people I love, I think I would cry the entire time. And I don't necessarily want to be sitting there crying. Yeah. I might like write them an email and or call them for a little bit and then be like, okay, now I'm going to just like stare at a wall. But there's an element of it that I realized this week in describing is like, oh, this is what New Year's is like. Where where it's like, yes, you're taking the fun, and sometimes at the end you're just like, we should have just stayed home together, or I should have just stayed home, and like that would have been way more fun, because this just kind of sucks. I mean, that said, I've had a few great New Year's, but it's sort of like gambling, where it's like you can't guarantee that if you go out to do the thing you intend for your last day on Earth, that it's gonna work out at all. Yeah,
it'll be disappointing.
I would have to second that, and that I feel like that's what I love so much about the way that Amy wrote my part in the movie is, I really do find it incredibly relatable that she is sort of trying to seize her moment and failing to do so for much of the night. So I don't know. I guess try and tell loved ones how I feel, maybe. Generally,
I'd probably generally that too. I'd probably be like, well, there was this period of time you were kind of an asshole, but I'd probably botch the entire thing.
Well, that's
why I just stare at a wall, because it's like, this is safe. It's only me.
Well, I told my husband, I was like, if this ever happens to us, we're not going to tell our kid. You just have to zip it.
So I always forget to bring this up in interviews, but I just tweeted it out. But I forgot, and we were well into shooting at this point, but my assistant Alex Watt brought it up, and she's wonderful. She helps me with my TV shows and everything. But she was like, oh, this reminds me of this Ray Bradbury short story, and I was like, I read this way back in the day, and it's basically about this couple who are like, oh yeah, we're gonna die tomorrow. It's the end of the world. Everything's done, and they just drink tea and then go to sleep. And and I was like, yeah, thank God. Because I was feeling like, is this really boring? Or is this, am I incorrect, or what's wrong with me that I feel sort of paralyzed when I think about this? And then I read that and I was like, okay, Ray Bradbury did it. And I'm like,
it sounds like a very nice way to go. I mean, we all just need to kind of chill out our last day.
Also, I just want to say, I feel like we got to the dress and the leaf blower, but the question also asked about design, and Ariel did such an amazing job. So Ariel Vida also did a wonderful job on production.
Do I have her present just really quickly, just so I can show you how thoughtful she is? I know we are running out of time. So this is the this is what Jane has in her lap that has all of this is the present to me. that Ariel made. And these are all the slides for her microscope. But what she did in each individual one, literally, she gave me this and I burst into tears because it was so thoughtful. Each one is a different still or behind the scenes image of the movie. And she handed it to me and she was explaining, you have to understand her because she's the sweetest person alive. But like, there's Kate. And like, each one is like unbelievably, it's just like, and it took her so much time and like her attention to detail, but that's how the entire movie was, is that this is on a budget. And this is like, sometimes when I went into Alien, they're like, oh, by the way, you can like play with this drawer and these buttons light up. But like, and I was like, of course, this is $100 million movie. But like on my scrappy film, she was like, oh, and I gave you guys choices of what to grab. And maybe you want to use this as a prop. And I'm like, how are you doing? She's just like incredibly thoughtful and thinks about these things, not just in terms of like the two-dimensional screen, but also how characters can be interacting with it in a live way, which I think is just unbelievably brilliant but thoughtful, you know.
Well, this sort of sparks one last question that I have that I was wondering, because I love the images of cells that sort of pop up throughout, like in the artwork, obviously the computer, and then the actual ones. Is that like a thread that the production design like connected like through? Because in the Chris Messina's house, I'm blanking on his character's name, but they have like those pictures that are very much like cellular images, and I didn't know if that was like kind of a thread that was being connected throughout, or
yeah, I mean, it's their relation, like well, what I liked about that is like, for instance, like my mom's relation to my work is like, that's great that you do that, you know, and she's very supportive. I know. But like you should see her responses to like some of the stuff I make. She's like, I don't understand what's happening. You're so talented though, you know, like it's very sweet. But what I liked about you, like, is that her brother hung it up, and then his wife was like, why do we have to hang this up? But to her, it's like a very intimate sort of like relationship to the things that she's doing. And then on a macro level, it just felt like I had to, if we're exploring death, you know, I had to acknowledge something that's like a body, like, but then also sort of doubles for like these other, like 2001 sort of like, you know, my take on the like universe, you know, of like something otherworldly, but also could be inside the body, and who knows? Because that's what my brain does when I think about death, is it's just like inward or outward, either way, it's like infinite, you know?
Yeah. That's great. Death, yes. So I think that's it. I want to thank you both, and congratulations on this truly, truly, truly incredible film. And I promise I want to get it inside a theater, even if it's like 5 years from now when we're able to.
I love that, yeah.
Because to see that and to hear that sound again, you know, would be amazing. And so everybody who's watching, I'm assuming you've all seen the film. If not, we presented you with some spoilers, but you can tell your friends and family that they can rent it on Amazon, iTunes, all the regular VOD places. And I want to thank Neon. I always love working with them. They do such a great job of supporting women filmmakers. And if you want to join us in our mission for gender parity in the film industry, go to futureoffilmisfemale.com. Thank you both again so much, and I hope that you are in, you're in more drive-ins still, right? Are you still in drive-ins?
I think so.
Yeah, go to a drive-in, go see the movie in person if you can.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it's still in LA too, and then I think there's a few in New York too. Claire, you can chime in if you want to, but she's gone. She's walked.
She's good.
She's like, if I'm allowed to, yes, we are.
Yes. Okay.
This is the third Amy talking, and yes, we are still in drive-ins.
Okay. Wonderful. So get your cars and rent your cars and go see it. And thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again for making this film and for talking with me.
Of course.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye. Of course. Bye.